A horse mocked for its stubby legs and ugly scars faces a bleak fate in the cutthroat world of racing. Then a mysterious woman steps in, spotting something no one else can see in this seemingly worthless creature. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. Things are grim, Lydia. If you don't step up fast, we're going to lose it all. Lydia Grayson clutched the phone hard as her brother's tense voice crackled through, each syllable striking her like a blow. Prado Verde Ranch, her family's cherished legacy across generations, hovered on the edge of ruin. Her mother had recently passed, and her father, now feeble and worn, had no energy left to rescue the ranch. Debts hung over them like storm clouds, swelling daily, too pressing to overlook. Lydia let out a heavy breath, her eyes drifting to the faded family photos lining her living room walls. Each image opened a window to times of victory, struggle, and heritage. But now they pressed down on her, a stark echo of the crushing responsibility she alone bore. "I'll handle Prado Verde Ranch," she announced finally, her tone firm with a determination that even caught her off guard. A pause stretched across the line before her brother let out a skeptical laugh. "You, Lydia? You don't have a clue what it takes to manage a horse ranch, especially in this mess. This isn't a pastime. It's tough work, a man's game. You can't just figure it out as you go." But Lydia had tuned him out. Resolute, she ended the call, her heart pounding with a blend of dread and conviction. She was stepping into the unknown, but one truth was clear. Standing still would cost her family everything they'd built. The ranch welcomed her on a brisk April dawn, the scent of straw, the steady beat of hooves on soil, and the soft nickers of horses in their stalls stirring a rush of childhood nostalgia. Yet as Lydia moved across the property, she sensed the heavy scrutiny of doubtful stares. The ranch workers traded looks that said it all. She was a woman untested in the realm of horse racing, a stranger in their eyes. Still, Lydia kept her chin up. She soon learned that overseeing a horse ranch went far beyond feeding stock and spectating races. It was a careful balance of tactics, endurance, and a near-instinctive bond with the animals. By night, she dug into volumes on bloodlines, training methods, and the mysterious traits that forged a winning racehorse. The road ahead was steep, but she was set on conquering it. One afternoon, as she surveyed the barns, Lydia's gaze settled on a colt that faded into the shadows. Tinier than its peers, with legs a touch too short for racing ideals, the creature carried a quiet air. What caught her eye most was a jagged scar running down its left leg, a mark of some old wound. Most handlers would have written it off without a glance. "That one's no good," she caught a trainer grumble, his voice dripping with disdain. "Too puny for the course. Won't get far." Brushing off their remarks, Lydia drew nearer. The colt stood warily, its deep, expressive eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite pin down. It might have been toughness, or perhaps fragility, or maybe a blend of the two. Gently, she stretched out her hand and paused, letting the colt decide if he'd trust her. At first, he wavered, pulling back a bit, but then he eased forward and brushed his muzzle against her palm. The brief touch sent a jolt of something electric through her. She couldn't put it into words, but Lydia sensed a quality in him that others overlooked. Later in her cramped office, Lydia sank into quiet reflection. Opting for this colt, whom she'd begun calling Blaze, wasn't the rational pick. He didn't boast the traits of a top contender. By every measure, he was a long shot. Most would have gone for a horse with superior lineage, brawnier build, and fewer imperfections. Yet Lydia couldn't shake the hunch that Blaze carried something extraordinary, something beyond reason or stats. She recalled her father's tales of the ranch's heyday, of horses that streaked across tracks like they were airborne. That same glint she'd heard about shimmered in Blaze's gaze. It wasn't merely about raw power, it was about soul. And Lydia was committed. She was fully invested. Her brother and the trainers tried to dissuade her, but her resolve stood firm. This wasn't a quest for the swiftest or mightiest steed. It ran deeper. Blaze had an elusive essence, a fire that seemed to crave the world's acknowledgement. It was an inner force Lydia felt echoing inside her own spirit. That evening, when she shared her choice with her brother, his response was sharp and scornful. "Come on, Lydia," he sneered, rolling his eyes. "That colt's a lousy bet. Rancho Prado Verde is crumbling, and you're staking it all on a horse with a scarred leg and stumpy steps? What's going through your head?" "I get your worries," Lydia answered softly, her tone even despite the turmoil churning within. "But this horse, he's got something. I can't define it, but I'm certain he's our answer." "Guts? Dreams? Those don't cover the cost, Lydia," her brother shot back. She met his stare, her will unshaken. "Sometimes all it takes is an opportunity. I'm giving him that." Her brother went quiet, though his frown carved deep lines of doubt. Lydia, though, wouldn't budge. Her gut assured her she was on track, and no tide of doubt could derail her certainty. The following morning, as a soft wind whispered through the barns, Lydia weighed her next step. Putting her faith in Blaze was only the beginning. She needed someone to unlock the horse's potential, a trainer who could grasp his distinct spirit and push through the tough times ahead. A name floated up in her thoughts: Nathan Cole. Now retired, Nathan had once been a titan in the racing scene, celebrated for his unconventional tactics and unrelenting principles. In his heyday, he'd pulled off astonishing triumphs, but the ceaseless grind of the industry had worn him down, leaving him jaded. Eventually, he stepped away from the limelight, settling into a more peaceful existence. Lydia understood that persuading Nathan to step back in wouldn't be simple. She brought little to the table beyond her earnestness and a burning resolve to rescue the ranch. Yet she clung to the hope that her fervor might reignite an ember within him. When she pulled up to Nathan's humble house perched at the rim of a vast emerald meadow, the quietness of the place hit her hard. The silence was broken only by the sporadic chirping of a bird. Nathan lounged on the porch, gazing off with a look of hushed reflection, as if the echoes of his past glories still pressed against his frame. "Morning, Mr. Cole," Lydia said, steadying her voice as best she could despite her thumping pulse. Nathan shifted his head leisurely, his sharp stare slicing past her greeting to probe her motives. He stayed silent, so Lydia forged ahead. "I'm here to ask for your assistance. I need you to work with a horse, a truly unique one." Nathan let out a brief, skeptical snort. "Assistance? From me? Miss, I walked away from horses years back." "I realize that," Lydia confessed, her tone steady, "and I get that I might not be the perfect person to pitch this to you. But give me a moment. This horse, Blaze, isn't ordinary. He's got hidden promise. He needs someone like you to unlock it, someone who sees what others miss." Nathan's doubt was plain, yet a spark of intrigue flickered in his eyes. "So what do you spot in this horse that everyone else overlooks? What sets him apart?" "He lacks the usual qualities people chase," Lydia answered, "but that's exactly why he's remarkable. There's a grit, a drive in him I've never witnessed elsewhere. With your training, I believe we could do something incredible. And it's not only about the horse, it's about saving Green Prairie Ranch. This place is my world, my family's world." Lydia's words held a soft but ironclad conviction. Nathan studied her closely, her plea stirring something long buried inside him. It tugged at the zeal he'd once lived by, before bitterness had pushed him from the game. He'd molded plenty of horses, crafted winners even, but the fire that had fueled his calling had faded long ago. Perhaps, just perhaps, aiding this woman and her colt could help him reclaim a piece of what he'd lost. "Fine," Nathan grumbled, his voice gruff yet firm. "I'll take on your horse, but listen close. I don't half commit. If Blaze doesn't have it in him, I'm out." Lydia dipped her head, her face resolute. "That's all I'm asking for, Mr. Cole." And with that, training kicked off. Blaze, once a timid and withdrawn colt, seemed to sense Nathan's commanding presence. With care and exactness, the veteran trainer set out to build mastery, boldness, and focus in the young steed. But the early days were anything but smooth. Blaze was restless, prone to mistakes, and easily distracted. Shortcomings Nathan did not overlook. "This horse has heart, but no consistency," he'd mutter after each session, his critique sharp, but tinged with a glimmer of hope. Lydia listened closely to every word, watching how Blaze slowly adapted to the rigorous pace of Nathan's training. She knew the old trainer was giving his all, and seeing Blaze's progress reignited her own determination. Yet it wasn't all hope and triumph. Back at home, Lydia was bombarded with calls from her brother and other family members, urging her to sell the ranch and cut her losses. "Lydia, this is madness," her brother said during one heated conversation. "We're bleeding money. You and that horse aren't going to save Green Prairie Ranch." Lydia gripped the phone tightly, frustration rising in her chest. Hearing skepticism and disapproval from her own kin stung, but she wouldn't back down. Each day Blaze honed his skills under Nathan's keen supervision, brought her nearer to her vision. Against all odds, she had faith in the horse and the promise he held. At last, the pivotal moment came. After weeks of relentless toil, Blaze was primed for his debut race. Lydia and Nathan had invested their souls in readying him, pushing through the arduous, painstaking process with unwavering grit. They were confident Blaze had hit his stride. The racetrack thrummed with anticipation as they arrived. Lydia couldn't escape the doubtful glares from fellow owners and trainers. To them, Blaze was a long shot, a horse lacking the stature to contend seriously. Under the blazing noon sun, the lineup formed at the gate. From the bleachers, Lydia's chest swelled with pride as Blaze settled into place. She understood this race was merely the start of a broader odyssey. Yet deep down, she was convinced her horse had the fire to stand out. Nathan stood fixed on the course, his face a mask of concentration, betraying nothing. He saw Lydia wringing her hands anxiously in her lap, but kept silent. Decades in the game had shown him words held little value in such tense seconds. The crack of the starting gun unleashed the pack, stirring up a swirl of dirt. Blaze launched with vigor, displaying the nimbleness and pace Nathan had meticulously shaped. Early on, the colt secured a steady spot, inching forward with each bound. Lydia's breath caught, her gaze riveted as Blaze surged past some of the race's frontrunners. Then it went wrong. Halfway in, Nathan's trained eye spotted a fatal slip. Blaze's jockey, misreading the moment, urged him too early. Rather than conserving strength for a strategic burst, the rider drained Blaze's reserves ahead of time. Rivals pounced on the opening, narrowing the distance. In the closing stretch, Blaze, sapped by the error, started to lag. As Lydia and Nathan saw him cross in third, a thick hush of letdown settled over them. The crowd's low murmur and the soft whisper of the breeze only amplified their somber mood. Though not a disaster, the first run underscored the steep path still ahead. Lydia inhaled deeply, battling to stave off despair, though a sliver of uncertainty gnawed at her confidence. Had betting so much on Blaze been wise? The media wasted no time weighing in. Doubters wondered aloud if this stumpy-legged colt truly held the promise Lydia and her crew clung to so fiercely. "Look," Nathan said, cutting through the strained quiet as they headed to the barns. "Third on a first go isn't a defeat. It's a sign we've got work to tweak." "But eyes are on us," Lydia countered, her tone laced with irritation and fragility. "They all said I was nuts to trust him. Now they're staring like I'm chasing a fool's errand." Nathan studied her silently, letting her words sink in. He grasped the crushing load she bore. Family hopes, the ranch's fate, and the need to justify her gamble. After a beat, he replied with a measured calm. "Lydia, horses are like folks. Not everyone's a winner out the gate. Some need time to figure it out, to mature, to hit their stride. Blaze has the goods. We've just got to find his beat, know his edges." This was only the kickoff. Lydia nodded, though doubt still muddied her thoughts. It seemed the world stood against her. Each misstep felt like a neon signal to throw in the towel. Her family's warnings and the media's unyielding spotlight rang in her mind. Still, despite the haze, Lydia rose at first light each day, driven to press on. Watching Blaze thunder down the track reignited a faint glow of optimism within her. The road would be grueling, she knew, but the resolve that had carried her this far outshone any scorn or hesitation. Nathan matched her with his own tireless dedication. Though age had etched lines on his face, he seemed to come alive on the track, meticulously fine-tuning Blaze's training. Lydia often observed him with a mix of gratitude and admiration. Nathan hadn't just agreed to train Blaze, he'd placed his faith in her vision. Over time, Lydia realized they shared a profound dedication, a mutual belief that Blaze could surpass everyone's expectations. Weeks of grueling preparation led to another pivotal race day. This time, Lydia and Nathan were confident. When they arrived at the racetrack, the air was electric with anticipation. The stands were fuller than ever, and reporters buzzed about, ready to document every moment. Lydia felt a nervous thrill coursing through her as she glanced towards Blaze. The horse shifted restlessly in the paddock, almost as if he sensed the magnitude of what lay ahead. "Today's the day," Nathan murmured, tightening Blaze's saddle. "He's ready. We're ready. Remember, no matter what happens, he'll give it everything he has." Lydia placed a reassuring hand on Blaze's sleek, muscular flank. "I believe in him, Nathan. I know he'll amaze us today." When the starting shot pierced the air, the race began in a flurry of motion. The horses surged forward, a blur of vibrant silks and powerful strides. Blaze launched with a striking burst of energy, his hooves pounding the ground with a rhythm that to echo Lydia's own heartbeat. At first, Blaze maintained a steady position in the middle of the pack, conserving energy under Nathan's careful strategy. The initial stretches unfolded without drama, but as the race progressed, the strongest competitors began to pull ahead. Standing by the track, Nathan gave a subtle but deliberate signal to the jockey. The message was clear. It was time to accelerate. Blaze surged forward with a power no one had anticipated. Each stride brought him closer to the front, his sleek, muscular form cutting through the track like a bolt of lightning. The crowd erupted, their cheers and applause rolling across the grandstands as Blaze advanced with unwavering determination. In the final stretch, he seemed almost supernatural, his speed defying logic as he overtook the favorites and crossed the finish line in first place. The racetrack exploded in celebration, applause echoing like thunder. Lydia felt her eyes well up with tears as she hurried down to the track, her heart pounding with triumph. They had done it. Blaze had won his first major race, and it was more than a victory. It was validation. Every ounce of effort, every gamble on this horse had been worth it. Nathan, ever reserved, allowed a small but proud smile to break his usual stoic demeanor. Lydia approached Blaze, gently stroking his neck, her voice trembling as she murmured words of pride and gratitude. Blaze, still catching his breath, met her gaze with an intensity that spoke of their unbreakable bond, a silent understanding that no one else could share. He wasn't just a racehorse, he was a fighter, her partner in this extraordinary journey. The press didn't miss the moment. Headlines sang Blaze's praises, marveling at his skill and the breathtaking finale he delivered. Within days, Blaze's name became synonymous with excellence in racing. Lydia's phone buzzed with calls from investors suddenly interested in the Green Meadow Ranch. People who had once dismissed her were now eager to capitalize on her success. Blaze's growing fame offered a lifeline, a renewed hope that Lydia clung to during every interview and every new conversation. Yet, as the world of horse racing consumed her, Lydia felt the sharp sting of what she was leaving behind. Her children, once accustomed to having her at home, now resented her absence. Late at night, the guilt would creep in, a heavy reminder of what she was sacrificing. One evening, her eldest daughter's words on the phone were like a dagger. "You're hardly mom anymore." Lydia tried to explain, but the distance between them was more than physical. That conversation left her hollow, questioning everything. How much was she willing to give up for her dream? The next day, watching Nathan train Blaze, she finally voiced her fears. "Nathan," she began, her voice unsteady, "I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. I've fought so hard for this ranch and for Blaze, but my kids, they don't understand why I'm not there anymore." Nathan paused, his gaze calm but serious. "Lydia, this path isn't an easy one. People, your kids included, might not see the bigger picture right now. All they see is your absence. Sometimes to gain something great, you have to lose something along the way. Only you can decide if the sacrifice is worth it." Lydia nodded, letting his words sink in. She knew she couldn't abandon Blaze or the ranch, but she also couldn't ignore the growing void in her family. She needed to find balance, a way to bridge the gap between the two worlds, pulling her apart. Later that day, Nathan noticed something subtle during Blaze's training. It was a faint shift in his left hind leg, a barely perceptible weakness that showed after a few laps. With his decades of experience, Nathan understood the gravity of even the smallest flaw. "We need to work on that leg," he told Lydia. "It's minor now, but if we don't address it, it could cost us a race." Lydia nodded, realizing that even champions had vulnerabilities. Just like Blaze, she wasn't invincible. They both had room to grow and improve. On the morning of the Triple Crown's first race at Bailey Downs, the atmosphere was electric. The air buzzed with anticipation, every corner of the racetrack alive with nervous energy. Lydia, usually composed, felt her heart racing, caught in a whirlwind of anxiety and hope. Blaze, standing tall and exuding confidence, seemed to sense the gravity of the day. Yet a shadow of doubt lingered in Lydia's mind, a small voice whispering fears about the cost of their relentless pursuit of victory. Nathan had noticed a slight strain in Blaze's leg days before. While the injury seemed minor, he knew it could worsen if not handled with care. The mounting pressure from sponsors and investors weighed heavily on him, with their constant calls underscoring the importance of Blaze running and winning this crucial race. Everyone had high stakes in the outcome. Lydia's brother, as always, brought up the idea of selling the farm, suggesting it was better than bleeding more money. But Lydia had invested too much to turn back now. Every sacrifice she'd made, every sleepless night, and every tear she'd to keep Green Prairie Ranch alive reminded her why she couldn't give up. When the moment came for Blaze to be led to the starting line, Lydia stood by, her heart pounding in her chest. Letting Blaze race had been an agonizing choice. Though she trusted her horse deeply, worry for his well-being gnawed at her. Standing beside her, Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently conveying that it would all work out. He, too, shared a profound connection with Blaze, knowing the horse wasn't just running for them, but for himself, an expression of his unbreakable spirit. The starter pistol fired, and the horses surged forward in a burst of energy, kicking up a cloud of dust. Blaze launched into his signature powerful stride, maintaining a dominant position in the first stretches of the race, his strength seemingly boundless. As the final turn approached, Lydia noticed a subtle shift in his gait, so faint that only someone who knew him intimately could catch it. Her stomach clenched. Something was wrong. Blaze's pace slowed just slightly, and though he crossed the finish line in a respectable position, he wasn't the first. Pride and concern mingled as Lydia watched her horse finish the race. While the outcome wasn't disastrous, it was clear the strain on his leg had been greater than she'd realized. Applause echoed across the racetrack as Lydia hurried to Blaze's side. The horse was breathing heavily, his determined eyes still shining with resilience. "He did well, but we can't ignore that leg as a real issue," Nathan said, stroking Blaze's muzzle with care. Lydia nodded, torn between pride for her horse's effort and anxiety about his future. In the hours that followed, Lydia was inundated with messages from investors, each one demanding updates on Blaze's performance and pressing her to ensure he would be ready for the next race. Amid the barrage of questions and advice, a single phone call left her shaken. It was her eldest daughter, her voice cold and distant in a way Lydia hadn't heard before. "Mom, when are you coming home? We barely see you anymore. It's like that horse is all you care about." The reproach stung, her daughter's words laden with resentment. Lydia tried to explain that she was fighting for something bigger, something that would ultimately secure their family's future. But her daughter wouldn't hear it. When the call ended, Lydia felt a fresh weight pressing down on her already burdened shoulders. That night, as she observed Blaze resting in the barn, Lydia mulled over the cost she'd paid. Missed time with her kids and the widening rift between them lingered in her mind like ghosts. Was it all worth it? She pondered, her thoughts a tangle of warring feelings. But when her eyes locked with Blaze's steadfast stare, the answer crystallized. He hadn't surrendered. Despite the injury, the fatigue, and the steep challenges ahead, Blaze stood poised to battle on. She couldn't turn her back on that grit. Bolstered by fresh determination, Lydia resolved to press ahead and gear up for the next test, the Kentucky Derby. The days that followed blurred into a flurry of dedication and attention. Nathan crafted a precise regimen to rebuild Blaze's vigor while easing the pressure on his wounded leg. The horse met it with his signature stubborn spirit, and as the Kentucky Derby loomed closer, Lydia's trust in her choice deepened. At last, the pivotal day dawned. The Kentucky Derby, a crown jewel of American racing, drew a thunderous throng, all buzzing to see if Blaze could beat the odds. Lydia, torn between nerves and resolve, watched from the stands as Nathan relayed last-minute guidance to the jockey. Blaze, exuding a regal air, seemed to sense the weight of the occasion. The race kicked off, and he burst forth with a force that left onlookers speechless. His pace was dazzling, each step more dominant than the last. Lydia's breath hitched, her gaze glued to him as he surged past rival after rival, steadily claiming the lead. Crossing the finish line, Blaze didn't just triumph, he smashed a speed record. Cheers and clapping exploded across the track. Lydia's chest swelled with a flood of pride and elation. This wasn't just Blaze's win, it was vindication for every trade-off she'd endured. From a distance, she sensed her family's eyes on her, and for a fleeting second, she dared to believe they might finally grasp why she'd staked everything on this vision. Yet amid the glory, a fresh concern crept in. Blaze had poured his all into this run, and though the result was spectacular, Lydia could tell he was more spent than ever. 2 grueling races in a row had worn him down, and signs of strain were starting to show. That night, watching him settle in the barn, Lydia confronted a harsh reality. The looming Belmont Stakes would be their greatest hurdle. Blaze was a warrior, but he wasn't invincible. Now Lydia faced the toughest call of her life. Would she gamble it all again, or pull back to safeguard his health? The next morning, Lydia rose with weary eyes, the burden of her choice bearing down. Sleep had eluded her, her mind tormented by the decision ahead. Every fiber of her longed to see Blaze claim the Triple Crown, yet dread for his condition clung tight. The press had already begun speculating about whether Blaze was fit to compete, and their relentless questions only added to the burden she carried. Is Blaze ready for one last race? Isn't this too risky? The reporters hounded her at every turn. Lydia met their questions with carefully measured responses, determined not to reveal the inner turmoil she battled. She knew even the slightest hint of doubt could be used against her. Outwardly, she remained composed, but inside she was anything but. That day, as Lydia watched Nathan tightening Blaze's harness, she felt an unusual tension between them. They had worked side by side for so long, united by a shared vision. But now something had shifted. "I can't believe you're even considering not racing," Nathan said, his tone low and tinged with frustration as he focused on the reins. "He's my horse, Nathan," Lydia replied, her voice a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. "I have to do what's best for him. What good is a victory if it comes at the cost of his safety?" Nathan sighed, setting the reins aside and turning to face her. "This horse is stronger than you think, Lydia. I've seen him run, seen his determination. Blaze isn't just a racehorse, he's a fighter. You can't take away his chance to prove that." They locked eyes in a tense silence, and in that stillness, Lydia felt the weight of Nathan's words. She believed in Blaze's indomitable spirit too, but she couldn't shake the fear of what could go wrong. The stakes had never been higher. The arguments with Nathan and the mounting pressure from sponsors grew more intense with each passing day, leaving Lydia feeling increasingly trapped. That night, drained and seeking solace, she decided to spend some quiet time with Blaze, hoping for clarity. Sitting beside him in the stable, she listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing, her hand gently stroking his neck. The simple act brought a rare sense of peace amidst the chaos. "You know," she whispered softly, as though the horse could understand every word, "sometimes it feels like everyone's just waiting for me to fail. But you're the only thing that makes all of this worth it." Blaze turned his head slightly, his deep, calm eyes meeting hers. In a gesture almost human, he nudged her shoulder with his nose, as if to offer reassurance. That small, tender act was enough to convince Lydia that Blaze, in his own way, was ready for one last fight. Lydia smiled, feeling the weight of her doubts begin to lift. The days leading up to the race had been a whirlwind of preparation and tension. Despite their lingering differences, Lydia and Nathan had found common ground in their final strategy. Nathan ensured Blaze had adequate rest and light exercises to conserve his energy, while Lydia managed the media and investors, reassuring them that Blaze was ready. The morning of the Belmont Stakes arrived, bringing with it an atmosphere so charged with anticipation that it felt almost sacred. The sky was clear, as if even the weather had chosen to grant them its blessing. Lydia was overwhelmed by a mix of nerves and excitement. Beside her, Nathan remained focused, his gaze locked on Blaze, who stood poised, his every muscle exuding restrained energy. Lydia scanned the grandstand, searching the sea of faces until she found her children. They were there, smiling at her with pride, and a glimmer in their eyes that reminded her of how much she had missed them, and how much she had sacrificed to reach this moment. A warm wave of emotion washed over her, and she felt her eyes welling up. She realized that no matter the outcome, bringing her family together here was already a victory of its own. As the starting time approached, the racetrack fell silent. Lydia could hear her own heartbeat, echoing the years of effort and sacrifice that had led her to this moment. She stroked Blaze's sleek coat, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. There was a calm intensity about him, as if he understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Lydia whispered softly, "This is your time, Blaze." The sharp crack of the starting bell shattered the silence. Blaze launched forward with a power so commanding that gasps rippled through the crowd. From the very first stride, his speed was breathtaking, every movement precise and unstoppable. Lydia's eyes never left him, her partner in every struggle surging ahead with an unwavering determination that left no room for doubt. With every yard he covered, the gap between him and the other horses widened. The crowd, initially quiet in awe, began to murmur, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Halfway through the race, Blaze had pulled so far ahead that even Nathan, usually the picture of composure, broke into a proud, unrestrained grin. Lydia clasped her hands tightly over her chest, her heartbeat sinking with the pounding of Blaze's hooves. She knew this was a moment that would forever be etched in her memory and in everyone else's. The crowd's amazement grew with every stride, faces lit with astonishment and admiration, as though they were witnessing a miracle unfold before their eyes. Blaze pressed on, his movements strong and tireless, embodying courage and raw, unyielding spirit. It was the very essence of what Lydia had always seen in him. As he neared the finish line, the entire stadium rose to its feet. Applause and cheers thundered in unison, filling the air with an electric energy. Tears blurred Lydia's vision as she watched Blaze cross the finish line, leaving the others far behind. He hadn't just won, he had made history, securing a legacy no one would ever forget. Lydia could no longer hold back her tears as she ran towards Blaze. Though he was panting heavily, his noble, serene expression remained, just as it always had. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the warmth of his body and the strength of his muscles. In that moment, every sleepless night, every doubt, and every obstacle melted away. Together, they had achieved something extraordinary, something no one could ever take from them. Amid the standing ovation, Lydia's eyes searched for her children in the crowd. She saw them approaching the track, their applause as heartfelt as the pride shining in their eyes. For the first time, Lydia felt a deep peace settle over her. She saw in their expressions an understanding she had longed for, a recognition of the reasons behind her choices, her absences, and her relentless drive. In that instant, Lydia knew it had all been worth it. At the end of the day, as the crowd dispersed and the echoes of victory began to fade, Lydia led Blaze back to the stable. Quietly, she took him out to an open field, where the setting sun cast the sky in warm, golden hues. She watched as he walked slowly, his gait still carrying the strength of a champion, yet tempered by the calm that only comes after a hard-fought triumph. Lydia stood there, her gaze fixed on Blaze, a mix of pride and gratitude welling up inside her. This moment, she realized, was the culmination of everything they had built together. The missteps, the victories, the tears. She knew this was more than just a chapter in racing history. It was a testament to something deeper, that perseverance, courage, and a love for one's craft can shatter barriers, even in a world that often seems to have no place for women like her. Blaze looked at her for a moment, and in his deep, expressive eyes, Lydia thought she saw an unspoken understanding, a mutual gratitude that required no words. Both of them, in silence, knew they had left an indelible mark, not just on the racetrack, but in the hearts of those who had witnessed their journey. Under the expanse of that open sky, Lydia felt a rare and profound peace. She had reached the end of what once seemed like an impossible road. And now, as the soft breeze wrapped around them and the sun dipped lower into the horizon, she understood that they had fulfilled their destiny together. This story isn't just about a horse rising above its scars and the world's scorn. It's a whisper to those dreams we hold deep inside, even when everyone else walks away. I found myself tearing up as that horse crossed the finish line, not just for the victory, but for the woman who poured her whole soul into believing an underdog could shine. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I'd ever have the guts to fight for what I love the way she did. And then it hit me. These moments, these stories, they fuel me. They might fuel you too. If your heart stirred even a little, if you believe tales of grit and love can change everything, then please hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Every week we'll bring you real stories straight from the soul, journeys that tug at your heartstrings. Stick with us to keep that spark of hope alive, because who knows, maybe tomorrow, your story could light up the world too.